Welcome to episode 272 of the Comic Watchers. I'm flying solo again this evening, but I do have an awesome guest. Kane, how's it going?
How you going, mate? Yeah, I'm going good. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Thanks for taking the time out of your day. I take it you're in Australia.
Yes, I am. I am on the west coast of Australia, so I think I'm exactly 12 hours difference from you. So I'm 12 hours in the future right now.
How is 12 hours in the future?
Well, it's cold over here, but it's the morning. Yeah.
Well, before we get started talking about the Underclass, which as I was, you know, doing some back, I realized that the Kickstarter ends tomorrow.
It does, yes. We've got, I think, 28 hours to go. So you will be one of my last podcast interviews. I think I have one tomorrow, and by the time I do that, it might be over. I'm not sure, but but yeah, we've already
Well,
reached the final goal, so that's good. But yeah, we're trying to keep pushing and pushing it a bit further.
definitely. Well, before we find out about the underclass, let's find out about you, about your history with comic books, both as a reader and creator.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've always loved comics since I was about 10 years old. That's when I read my first comic and bought my first comic, and it was issue 100 of Wolverine back in the 90s, I believe it was. And yeah, I've still got it. I've still got it in the other room. I've got a whole room full of comics in there, but yeah, that one's special to me, so I never got rid of it. But it's got, dents and things all over it because I used to trace the cover over and over and over because I just wanted to draw like that so badly. So I've always been attracted to drawing ever since I was a kid. As soon as I could pick up a pencil, all I wanted to do was draw. And so, as soon as I discovered comics, I was like, oh, okay, you can kind of do this for a living, and you can tell stories through your drawings. So yeah, that's essentially where it began. And then kind of my love for all things pop culture kind of spawned from there, movies and animation and manga, anime. Yeah, eventually as I grew up, I got older and discovered more adult style comics, which is, the stuff that I like to make and read now. And my first kind of introduction to that was Sin City, I think. And it's heavily influenced in this book. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, what made you want to create your own book?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it just always seemed to me that some of the best artists are comic book artists, that would always seem that way to me anyway. I mean, when I was real young, I probably was more like, oh, I want to be an animator. But, slowly I realized, well, you can't just be one person and be an animator. It takes a team of like thousands of people. I was like, oh, okay. I can't really pull that off. But I can make comics by myself, That's the good thing about comics. Anybody can just sit down and make a comic, just need the time and the energy. So, yeah, I guess growing up reading Marvel comics and things like that and getting a feel for how they work and how storytelling works through comics, I was always kind of trying to recreate them when I was young, make little versions of them, in school and things like that. But yeah, I'd say I only started like seriously trying to create one probably like, probably in my 20s, maybe like mid-20s. And, I went through lots of different styles, different iterations, until I found my style that I connect with the most and think works the best. And ended up with this story that we have now, which is more adult and quite violent. But yeah, originally when I started making comics, I was more going towards like martial arts stories, and I might go back. I might circle back to that later, and do another project once I've finished these ones. But right now, I'm more focused on like the crime genre.
So is the Underclass your first published work, or have you done books before?
I would say, well, yeah. I mean, look, I've done covers in the past for other publishers. I've done like coloring and things like that. But this is the first thing that's like all mine. So, I wrote it, I illustrated it, I colored parts of it, because it's mainly black and white, but there are bits of color in there. And yeah, it's all me. Yeah. So this was the first one that I've like seriously pushed to the max and done as much as I really possibly could.
So let's start talking. Let's get into the Underclass. Kind of give us the large overview of the story, and then we'll kind of drill down from there.
Okay. So it's set in a high school that teaches kids to be criminals, but that's just the setting. So it's essentially 4 short stories split into 5 chapters about these students that are sent to the school, because they have no other option, and they're not criminals. They're not taught by criminals. They're not, they're kind of stuck in the middle, and they basically have to figure out how to survive the school. And so it's kind of like Sin City meets, Sin City is set in a high school essentially, because it's really separate stories of different characters, but their stories kind of cross paths with each other's stories, and they're all kind of in the same place. So it's all pretty much set within the school. Yeah.
And so, who are the main characters? Are there different characters in the 4 stories?
Yes, there are. So the first character in the introduction to the book is a guy called Frank, and he's the freshman. The name of the chapter is called The Freshman, and that gives you an introduction into the school, because you see from his perspective, it's literally like his first day at the school. He doesn't know about the school. He doesn't know how it operates, but he gets a quick kind of introduction into how it operates quite violently. And you slowly kind of see him changing through his time throughout the school, and how he copes and what he's willing to do to survive. And the second chapter has, there's a couple of characters. It's called Knife Fight. So it's about 2 girls having a knife fight within the school. But I would say the main character within that chapter is, I think her name's Violet. A lot of these characters, I didn't really put names to them. I wanted them to kind of be anonymous, but we created a yearbook afterwards, and then so I put names for everyone. But yeah, so she's basically, she wants revenge for something that was done to her by this girl, and that chapter gets pretty bloody. The next story, I believe, is the next one's Sophomore Serial Killer. So this character actually is anonymous. You're not really supposed to know his name, because he might come back in a later story. But he's essentially, he's like Dexter. So he goes around the school quietly. He's probably the best killer in the school, but nobody knows who he is, because he does it discreetly. And, he sees it as kind of himself taking out the trash and getting rid of kind of the worst in the school. But, eventually he kind of takes it too far, kills the wrong people, pisses off the wrong people, and starts getting closer and closer to the top, where he can't really hide anymore. And the next story is a story called Skate Race. So there's a whole bunch of different characters in this one. I mean, I wouldn't say there's one main character. It's basically a group of skaters, and they're going through this race in the school that's set annually every year. And the concept of the race is, if you win the race, you can't be touched for a full year by anyone in the school. No one can hurt you. No one can beat you. No one can extort you. But the catch is there's traps all around the race. So if you get caught in even one trap, you can die. So it's up to you whether you want to risk it or not. You know what I mean? So these people have to volunteer if they want to.
Kind of like a Running Man type situation.
Exactly. But on a skateboard.
So where did the idea for this high school come from? Not personal experience, I hope.
Well, not as bad as this, but I think we can all relate to being bullied in school in some way, or I just pushed it to the extreme here. Yeah, I mean, look, I always wanted to create something kind of like Sin City because it was always my favorite comic. So I was just looking for a new angle, and really the book kind of started with. I'll show you this picture. It started with this image, which is the chapter cover for the second chapter. So that was the first thing I drew. And originally, I don't know, I was thinking like a horror story or something, I don't know. But from that image, I was like, oh, okay, why would these two schoolgirls be fighting like that? And why is this school so violent? And then I was like, well, what if the school kind of teaches them to be violent? And it's a school that teaches criminals of all kinds. And then from there, it just kind of spiraled. And I was like, oh, that's a great idea. Now I can put different characters in this school. They're learning different things, and that was kind of the basic concept. Yeah.
Well, when you were talking about the the stories, the second story about the two girls in a knife fight kind of jogs one of my first memories of high school as a freshman. Was walking to my locker one morning and hearing a thud, thud, thud around the corner, and I look and this one girl's jamming this other girl's head into the floor. So, and I was like, great. I see nothing.
Yeah.
So I hope you didn't have any experiences like that, or and this is not some way of working through them.
Yeah, I think everyone's, experienced something crazy in their high school experience, but luckily mine wasn't, it was never really that bad. You had fights and stuff every now and then. Sometimes you have to be involved in them. But, there wasn't anyone that got maimed permanently or killed or anything like that, luckily. But, I think a lot of it comes from watching prison films as well. I think I put a lot of that into this.
So, doing the writing and the working on the illustrations, which do you gravitate towards one more so or the other, or are you able to kind of marry them together and have them feed off of each other?
Well, I consider myself an artist first. So, I've always been drawn to creating art, and I think, you can even tell a story just in one picture, so you don't even need any words. But yeah, with my process, I generally start with the pictures first. So I'll start straight mapping out a storyboard. I won't even write a script. I'll just do a storyboard of what these characters are doing, what they're doing physically, and building their kind of story up just through visuals. And then when I get to the end of it, I go back and then I start writing the dialogue because I know
kind of like the Marvel method that they used to use.
Exactly. Yeah, except they had two guys doing it, which is crazy to me. Like, you're going to go, that's cool. I've got an idea for that. Like, whoa, worked out well.
You often have arguments with yourself as you're, trying to go back between the pictures and the dialogue.
Yeah. No, I think you should do it this way. No, this way. Yeah.
Why did you do that? You're writing me into a corner.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess I didn't really know how people created comics. I just kind of started doing it,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to do it the way I want to do it. You know what I mean? And then, later I found out that generally people write a full script first and then they break down the scene in written form. And I was like, oh, it's almost like a movie script. And my brain doesn't work that way. I need to start visually. I've always been a visual learner and a visual storyteller. So yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think you're probably one of the few people that I've heard that they work that way.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't realize it was that unique, but I guess there's no wrong way to create a comic. As long as the final product works, hey,
Mhm.
what works works.
So how long does it take you, when you start, I guess, in your process, putting getting the pictures down, and then going back through and adding the dialogue? Uh, how long is that process, and do you have a certain method? Not, I don't say method, but do you write on the schedule, or do you kind of when you are inspired to do so?
Well, this book from probably beginning to end took about 4 years. Um, but that's not including like editing and things like that after the fact. But the guts of it was done in about a 4 year period. But that was all done kind of in my spare time.
Mhm.
So it's really, I didn't have like a planned out schedule, like I had to get so many pages done per day or per week or whatever. I was kind of learning as I was doing it. So I was just whatever I could do, in the amount of spare time that I had, I was happy with. Um, but as I've done this now, I learned so much just doing it. Now I'm a lot faster. So I've already started working on the next one, and I've done about 10 pages so far. But it's going to be longer. It's about 150 pages in total. But I'm hoping, and I think if I stick to kind of my guns of trying to get a couple of pages done per week, I could probably get it done within a year. So yeah,
And do you work traditionally or uh, digitally or a hybrid?
I'm a digital artist. Yeah, I mean, when
Okay.
first started learning, obviously it was all on pencil and paper. But now, like when I went to college and learned, illustration and graphic design and things, everything was done digitally, and that's how they taught us. And it just made the process so much easier because if you want to erase something, you just delete it. You
Mhm.
don't have to mess around with an eraser and then messing up the paper, and it's just like, oh, thank God. And coloring, it makes coloring so much quicker. But yeah.
And do you also ink the pages too?
Yeah, I pretty much, I do a rough drawing and then I go straight to line work, which is basically inks straight away. Yeah. But
Mhm.
I'm constantly refining things as I'm doing it. Like if I don't like something, I'll just erase that and then go back, do it again. But also, a lot of the time, especially with this book, like when I finished the whole book, I went back and from the start again, and I went, okay, there's more space in the backgrounds that I think I can fill up, and I added more to it over the whole thing again, you know, and I think it added to it. It made it look more real and more gritty, and that was kind of the goal. So yeah, oftentimes I'll rework things.
Now, this is 4 stories. Do you possibly have more stories to tell set in the same high school?
Well, I would say no, not in
Okay.
the high school. Not to spoil it, that's all.
Yeah,
Um,
I wouldn't want
but
you
you'll
to.
by the end why that's not possible. Put it that way. Um, but the next in the series is going to expand into the city, the outer city. So this story is all these stories and this book are pretty much all self-contained within this school. But eventually, in the next book, you're going to see the city and why the school exists, and what type of city would this school be in? Probably a pretty bad city. So it's going to become more like stories of characters grown up that grew up in this, went through the school and how it affected them, and then their place within the city and how they cope with their past and what they have to do to survive as adults. So kind of like Sin City, you know what I mean? Different
Mhm.
stories, but all different graphic novels of these characters in different parts of the city.
So, which artists would you say influence your style?
Oh, that's a good question. Jeff Darrow, 100%. Um, Jeff Darrow and a guy called Juan Jose Rep, who works for like Marvel now. Well, I think he works for a couple of different companies. But yeah, I mean, I remember when I was studying in college in my 20s, and that's when I found out about Jeff Darrow, and I immediately went to my comic store and I ordered a copy of Hard Boiled, and they had to get it like shipped over from America, I think. And once I saw that book, I was like, okay, this is like the highest level of comic art that I've ever seen. There's no like space that's left unused, and I had no idea that you could even do that in a comic. I was like, it's insane. So, I basically dedicated the rest of my life to learning how to do that. and and I think I've accomplished it for the most part. Maybe I'm not as quick as some other comic artists, but it looks good, and I've had multiple people at conventions come up to me and say, it looks like Jeff Darrow's work. And I'm always like amazed that people even know who he is and compare me to him. It's crazy. But yeah, the other guy, Juan Jose Rep, I learned about around the same time. And he did Frank Miller's RoboCop comic, and that blew my mind because I think he took it even further than Jeff Darrow. Like, it was just every panel was even more packed. It's crazy. And I was just like, man, it must have taken like 10 years to create this thing because it's just insane. But I think some of these guys, I don't know, they're just like born with these rare brains that can just do these things. For me, it took a while to learn it. I really had to sit down and study their work. But, anything worth doing, you got to take the time, and I think it paid off.
How about on the writing side? I know you've mentioned Frank Miller. Are there any other uh, writers that you tend to lean towards or follow?
Yeah, well, I'm always, drawn to more of the adult style storytellers. So more violent stories and things like that. So obviously Frank Miller, yes, is a huge influence for me in storytelling and writing. But I would also say Mark Miller, like Kick-Ass was a really good one because it was so like, so off the wall but violent, and I love that kind of stuff. Also Garth Ennis for sure. When I started reading Preacher when I was younger, I was like, yeah, this is very, very top, high level writing. And now The Boys, I mean, come on, all that stuff is fantastic. But also, I would say like Quentin Tarantino as well, although he's, obviously a director and a writer of film.
Uh-huh.
I love writing like that. The dialogue is so rich and packed and it's gritty storytelling. It's violent. It doesn't pull any punches. I like anything like that. So things that are made to shock you,
Uh-huh.
That's my style.
So you said that you've done most of the work on this project. Who else is helping you? Because it sounds like other people are also helping you along.
Yeah. So when I had it finished, I was submitting it to different publishers. And then I realized it probably needs some editing. So I hired two separate professional editors. So I went through two rounds of edits just, out of my own pocket by myself before I started sending it to more publishers. So that definitely helped. I learned a lot about, how the written word should look on a page when it comes to comics. It's different than books, obviously. Yeah, so after that, I started submitting again to more places. And then I eventually found my publisher, which is called Wild North Comics. And they were running a competition at the time. They had two competitions. One of them was an art competition and one of them was a comic book competition. So I submitted to both of them and I won both of them. So from that, they agreed to publish my comic, and they agreed to publish 2 other books for me, 2 art books. One's a coloring book, and one's just like an art book. So through that, I met my editor. His name is Timothy Parrish, and he's one of the founders of the company, and he helped me a lot with we went through and kind of moved some of the stories around, because originally they were in a different order. One of them we split into 2, and I think it works better that way. But I wrote it in a way that it really could go in any order and it would still work. But he helped me out with we changed the cover. The cover was originally a completely different cover, and at the time I was a bit resistant, but now looking back and looking at it now, I think it was definitely the right move. The logo I had, the title logo, looked completely different as well. We changed that. So definitely, took like 3 other people and me to kind of get it to its final state. Essentially everything that's on the inside is still what I created. Yeah.
And I noticed the cover. Is that the cover you did?
Yeah. So essentially, the main cover was originally supposed to be the art gallery cover at the back of the book. It was a double-page spread, and my editor saw that and he said that should be the cover. You should make it a wraparound cover. And I was like, I didn't even think about that, but yeah, that's actually a pretty good idea. And then I started showing it to people and asking their opinions, and they were like, yeah, definitely that one. And I was like, okay, let's go with that.
That is a very striking cover.
Yeah. Yeah, I like it. It works for sure.
So let's talk about the campaign. As I said, there's about 28 hours left. So if somebody's watching this, they should definitely go check it out. And but is this your first time doing a crowdfunding project?
It is mine, yes, but not for Wild North Comics. So I'm doing it through their account. So they've done, I think, four projects before. But yeah, this is my first experience. So I had to learn a lot kind of going through it, and people helped me out and kind of gave me guidance along the way. But essentially, like 90% of the hard work was done by me. When it comes to marketing and creating the page and things like that. And, we hired some other people to do the trailer, but, most of it was, me figuring out, doing research, going from past campaigns and seeing how things are structured and talking to other creators and to get it to where it is now. But yeah.
What do you think the most important thing that you learned in that process that has led to the success of this campaign?
I think, pre-launch is very important. Pre-launch marketing. But I would say, maybe keep the goal probably low to begin with, so that you get funded quickly. But also, learn to market well. Learn to, and don't be afraid to ask your friends and family to chip in, because that'll help boost you in the algorithm. I think those things are very important.
So what are the reward levels that you're offering for people to back the project?
Well, we've got heaps of them. So, you can just get the book by itself, or you can get an alternate cover, which is a painted cover that I've done as well. Then you can get both of those covers in one bundle. Then you can also get the graphic novel plus my 2 other books. So one of them is this, which is a coloring book. So as you can see here, got some really
from the name of the book, it looks like you're going to need a lot of red.
Yeah, definitely. It's, you're probably going to run out of red before any other color. And the other one is this hardcover art book, which is called Maximum Volume. And it just has a whole bunch of different stuff that I've done in the past, like 10 years. And it's a lot of it's like cyberpunk themed stuff, but yeah. So you can get all of 3 of those books in a bundle. You can also get the whole catalog of Wild North comics, graphic novels done by different creators, including my book. We also have a tier where you can get your face drawn into the book. So we're doing a yearbook, and I've already done most of the faces, but you will get your portrait in the yearbook, and you can put a quote, and your name will be there, and it will be there in every edition that will be printed forward. Also, there's another tier where you can get skateboards. As you can see behind me, we've got a couple of skateboards here that I've recently got printed, and yeah, they're high quality 7-ply Canadian maple, so you can actually skate on them if you want, or you can just hang them on your wall. We also have a tier where you can hire me to do a commission. I think that's it. Yeah. But also all of those things you can have as add-ons as well, separate add-ons. So if you just want like one book out of the collection, you can just add that onto whatever you bought, or you can just add one skateboard. It doesn't have to be in a bundle. It's up to you.
So as you were showing the coloring book, is there a different approach that you took to that than you took to the art in the Underclass?
Well, I mean, I guess so. Yeah. I would say so, because a lot of that stuff, these were just general art pieces I was doing back in the day, and a lot of them started out as T-shirt designs, because I used to sell a lot of T-shirts online, but they were starting to not sell as well anymore, and I was like, how can I, turn these into something else? And then I would just put more and more into the backgrounds and turn them into prints, essentially. So that's kind of how they started. But a lot of them are cyberpunk themed, which is, very different than the Underclass, which is crime themed. It's more based in more of a realistic kind of world. But, there's also digital paintings and things like that in there. But the coloring book, is essentially a lot of what's in the coloring book is in the art book, but we just took away the color so you can color it yourself, because it was actually my publisher's idea. He said, he just was looking over my work one day and he was like, your work would be great for a coloring book, just the line work. And I was, why didn't I think of that? It's a fantastic idea. So we went ahead and did that, and that's a whole new market you can tap into there. Adult coloring book lovers. Yeah.
So, what, being, I guess, relatively new to the comic book, writing and stuff like publishing, have you learned any lessons that you wish you had known when you first started out that you would tell your somewhat younger self?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Yeah, I would say, you don't have to do it all yourself. It's okay to get help, definitely go through a process of editing as well, and probably earlier on in the process rather than later on, because once some things are done, it's hard to go back and redo them, yeah, always take feedback on board as well. But if you really believe in something, stick to your guns. Don't let someone change the things that make your story yours. You know what I mean? So
Yep.
know when to hold your ground. Yeah, those are probably the main ones. Yeah.
Well, kind of piggybacking off of that, what you just said, was there, when you were getting feedback on your work, was there any advice that you kind of really took,
Yeah,
really kind of like clicked and said, Okay, I see that. I
Yeah,
will.
yeah, yeah. Well, the first, I believe it was the first, or was it the second? Yeah, the first round of editing, the editor that I hired, um, there was one scene in the knife fight story that I cut out, um, and I just replaced it with something else. But it was because the editor said it's too extreme. Like no publisher will take this book on if that's in it. And I was like, really? I've read other books with worse stuff than that, but I mean, okay, maybe it is a little much. Okay, so I changed it slightly, yeah. But I can see now, looking back, yeah, it probably was a bit much, you know. But I do like to push things to the extreme, you know. But I mean, when you read that chapter, you might think like, this is, I can't imagine anything being worse than this, but trust me, there was. But yeah, you know, you have to, I guess, just think outside the box, think from other people's perspective and point of view, and be like, okay, am I going too far? You know?
Stepping back away from the project, what is the indie comic scene like down in Australia? And are there different comics and creators that maybe we don't know of here in the States that we may might should be aware of?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't know how much you know about Australian comics, but I mean, the scene is pretty cool. You know, everyone's pretty friendly. We all kind of help each other out and work with each other, even though we're different publishers and different indie creators and things like that. Like when we go to conventions, we all kind of know each other. We're all in like Facebook message groups where we chat about what we're doing and help each other out and follow each other's projects and things like that, promote each other. Even, to the point where like in this campaign, so the digital version, if you back the digital version, you get 3 other comics by different comic companies, because I asked these people, hey, do you want to chip in and give out a free comic? And they were like, yeah, for sure. And I'll be like, if someone asks me, I'll do the same thing for them. So we're all pretty tight like that. As far as comics that are Australian comics that I think you should read, there's one called Gods Among Men by Sign Nation Comics. Have you ever heard of them?
Yes, I've interviewed the brothers.
Yeah, yeah. That book is fantastic. Yeah, I read that, and that's in the PDF pack that I've got for this campaign as well. They were nice enough to offer it up, and yeah, they're really well written, and the art is really good. Um, Other than that, I think all the books that we create are pretty fantastic. From Wild North Comics. But there's also, there's a company called Gestalt Publishing. They're the largest publisher in Australia, and they're based in my city, and they have some really cool stuff. A lot of it is like they have this thing called the Indigiverse, which is like indigenous superheroes, so like
Oh,
Aboriginal
cool.
superheroes, things like that, and they get a lot of like press and stuff, and I kind of have a relationship with them, and yeah, their stuff is really cool. So you should probably check them out as well.
I just assumed that Australian comics you were required to put like a kangaroo or a koala bear in, or
A lot sometimes they are, like there's one called Killaroo, which is about a killer kangaroo. But some of them are, but they don't all have to be. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Some of them are Australia, some of them are not. Like my storytelling has always been more leaned towards like set in America or a fictional city within America. You know what I mean? Um, because that's just what the kind of stuff I grew up kind of consuming and reading and watching, was mainly, a lot of crime stuff set in the US. But yeah, I think, you can be anywhere and create a story that's set anywhere these days. With the internet, you can get so much information about those places. You don't necessarily have to live there, That's my point of view.
Now, as you were growing up and getting into comics, were there certain comics that were easier to get? Like I assume that DC and Marvel, you were able to get them down there somehow.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, definitely. I mean, we don't have a lot of comic stores in Australia, especially in my city. My city is actually the most isolated city in the world. Um, so growing up, there was only like one comic store, but we had news agencies, which is like places where you buy a newspaper and stuff,
mhm.
and they would have like mostly Marvel comics. So that's one of the reasons that's what I grew up reading and was more drawn to Marvels, because it was really the only thing around. It was easy to get a hold of. There was always an X-Men comic or a Wolverine comic or a Spider-Man comic at the newsagents, and every time I would go there, I'd buy one. DC kind of, I think it came a little bit later. There was a little bits of it here and there. Every now and then you see a Batman comic or something like that, but you'd never see like a Superman comic at a news agency for some reason. I don't know. Maybe Marvel had some deal with Australian distributors. Who knows? But eventually, when I was probably in my early teen years, I started going to the one comic store in my city, and they had everything. They've got everything you can think of. And as soon as I walked in, I was like, "Whoa!" There's like a whole world like of different comics that I didn't even know about. You know what I mean? And that's how I found out about things like Preacher and things like that. And yeah, I got a peek into seeing like what DC comics and what they're about, but it still wasn't really my thing. I was really on the Marvel train by then. But that's, essentially most people start the same way that I did, which is, news agencies and things like that. And sometimes you go to like a market, it's like a flea market or something, and they have like pop-ups stands, but yeah, it's pretty rare.
So if given the chance, do you have a Marvel or DC? Even though you're not a DC person, is there a character that you would like to use your kind of crime
Hmm.
style for?
Well, yeah, that's interesting. Well, I don't know if I would. Yeah, I don't know. If I was going to do a character, I'd want to draw them as well, obviously.
Hmm.
So it would be Iron Fist. Iron Fist is my favorite Marvel character. But I wouldn't go with a crime story. I would make it more mystical martial arts, but intense and violent, more violent. Because the best martial arts movies are the ones that are really violent. Come on. um, but yeah, that would be what I would be drawn to. But funnily enough, I was talking with my editor, and he was like, "Oh, if I write an Iron Fist story, do you want to draw, a couple of things and mock them up and send it to Marvel and see what they think? See if we can get a gig, maybe doing it together." And I was like, "Yeah, okay." But I don't know if that'll happen or not, but I'd say it's worth a try. So.
Have you done that before, where you take something somebody's written and just do the art for it? And how different is that from you're doing it all yourself if you've done it?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't done like a full comic um, uh, based on someone else's writing before. The closest I've gotten is probably coloring one, but I have done covers, for other people and other companies, so they tell me what their character is and what they want it to look like and what pose they want them to be in, and I go with their direction and things like that. And I'm working on a few right now, actually. So, I mean, going forward, I think I would like to be a cover artist. That's really would be great. But I also want to, work on my own stuff, my own books. So, I'm more drawn to creating my stuff because it takes so long. I don't want to waste time on other people's projects. It's like, okay, they might be the coolest project in the world, but I need to get these ideas out of my head and onto paper before it's too late. You know what I mean? Because this one I was cutting it close, even like by the time I was done, there was like another comic that was very similar to it that had come out while I was making it. And I was like, oh man, my idea was so unique and original, and they just come this close, you know what I mean? And now my next book is even more unique and original, and I'm just hoping no one thinks of it before I get it out.
So you just mentioned being a cover artist. Who are your favorite cover artists? That,
I think I love David Mack's cover work, especially for uh, Fight Club comic. That stuff was really awesome. Um, but I always loved what's that guy's name? Glenn Fabry, who did the Preacher covers. Now those were amazing. That's kind of what got me into like digital painting. So I can do that sort of style as well. It takes me longer, but a lot of the stuff that I do, I learned by studying his work when it comes to digital painting, and that stuff's fantastic. But also, like Frank Frazetta, his stuff is incredible too. The way he does movement and light and shadows. And I don't know if you could call him a cover artist, but he's just a great painter in general.
yeah,
But yeah, those three
oh, yeah.
guys, yeah,
It looks like he dabbles or something.
yeah.
So for you, for a cover, yeah, I mean, even though they tell you what they want, what is your method of staging a cover that you've been commissioned to do?
Yeah, well, it's tough sometimes. It can go two ways. Sometimes I can give you complete freedom to just come up with something, which is fun. And sometimes they're like, I want you to do exactly this. And they'll give you like even a rough sketch and they'll be like, this is what I want you to do. It's like, okay. Which, can be kind of boring, but you can always put your own little spin on it. You know what I mean? Change things
Mhm.
just a little bit so it looks better, because not all, then it's not always an artist, that wants you to do it. It's just like a writer and they don't really know how good art works. You have to kind of nudge them in the right direction, gently. But yeah, I mean, if I'm doing something where I have complete, free will, I'll always choose something with a dynamic pose, but also a dynamic perspective. I think some of the best stuff is stuff from different perspectives and angles. That's why I think this cover works so well. You're looking from the top down,
Mhm.
So I could have just done the crowd and they're all just standing across, but that would just be so boring. You know what I mean? And I want to fill the page up. I want every part of it completely packed. So, that's something that I aspire to do in everything as well. And even commissions, like I've just been commissioned to do a character portrait of Cable from X-Men.
Mhm.
And, I've shown him the process of how far it is and he's loving it. And, that, yes, you draw one character, of course, because that's what I've commissioned to do. But the whole background will be packed with detail as well. Yeah, because why have a blank background? It's just so boring.
Well, going back to the cover for the Underclass, I like the look how it's like you see the crowd there, but then you see like the school in the distance. That's I guess
Yeah, yeah,
interesting juxtaposition. I guess is the word.
yeah. Well, you got to kind of show at least a sneak peek into the violence. You know what I mean? Like, okay, you don't want to put bloody murder on the cover because that might turn people off, or you don't want kids to look at it and be like, at like a comic convention or something. But you've got to give people a little sneak peek of what it's about. And sadly, they say don't judge a book by its cover, but that's really what comics are. I mean, the only reason I picked up my first comic was because I loved the cover. You know what I mean? So you really
Mhm.
need to think about these covers. They're important.
So, is there anything else about the campaign or the book that you wanted to make sure to mention that maybe we didn't cover?
Um, well, just the campaign is over soon. It'll be done so tomorrow at about 12:30 my time. So it'll be 12:30 at night where you are. Yeah, we've already reached the funding goal, so there's no risk really anymore. We already have the 2 art books printed, so there's no risk there. Yeah, these are pre-launch editions, so I've been just selling these at conventions and signing them down here and numbering them. But the final book will be printed very soon, and it will have the yearbook in it. And so because we've already printed these ones, it'll be a quick process because we already have the printer, sorted out. They know how to do it. So yeah, it'll be pretty quick turnaround, I think. And we are distributing in the US through Amazon, so there's no problem getting physical rewards to people in America and even Europe. So if anyone's interested, jump on now, and you won't be disappointed. We got lots of great stuff on the campaign. Just check it out. Yeah.
How, and I forgot to, and I don't know if I asked this or not, but how was the campaign? Was it a roller coaster of kind of, are we going to make it? Are we not? Because a lot of people who are doing Kickstarter that I talk to say it's a roller coaster, and you have a really good start, and then it kind of lulls in the middle, and then it picks back up, and
Yeah, that's exactly what happened, and that's exactly how I would describe it. Yeah, I mean, I see some people, the lucky few on there, like they get funded in the first hour or the first day or something. I'm like, geez, that would be nice. You wouldn't have to worry about it for the rest of the time. But essentially, for a month, I'm like, is it going to work? Is it not? I'm thinking about it. I'm worrying about it. But at the start, yeah, it was a boost. Like we got like probably over $1,000 in the first day. So it was like, oh, okay, we could probably even get to like 10 grand pretty easily, but then it just kind of flatlines. And then you get a little spike every now and then sometimes it will go up a bit, and then it would just kind of flatline again. And then towards the end, it kind of goes, whoa, you get a wave, which is good. And that's kind of where we
you're
are
there
now.
biting your fingernails, going,
Exactly. It's like, oh, how's this going to work? Yeah. But, all you can do is try and just keep promoting online and everywhere you can, but also, in person, it helps to, meet people and, go to conventions and talk about your projects and stuff like that. But yeah, just do
how do you
podcasts as well.
how do you feel that the book has been received uh,
So far,
as
pretty
you've
well.
been doing your?
I mean, I haven't had anyone that's read it that had a negative comment about it. I had one person online that hadn't read it and just sort of said, oh, it sounds kind of generic. I'm like, how is this? This is anything but generic. This is totally off the wall, in your face, insanity. But they haven't read it yet, so make your own opinion once you've read it. I guarantee you, it's not like anything you've ever read before. But yeah, I've through selling pre-launch editions at conventions and things like that, I've had people say, yeah, I loved it, and I was like, oh, thanks, man, that means a lot. And that's one of the best, things is, it's good to sell books and it's good to know that there's a demand for them. But the best thing is getting feedback after the fact and people going, yeah, it was great. That really, I love that. Yeah.
And what do you, with that feedback, what do you, if anything, do with any negative feedback? Do you kind of keep that in the back of your mind the next time you're writing, or
Hmm.
because I know you can't write for everybody or every and please everybody, but
Yeah, of
does that
course.
kind of stick in the back of your mind when you're doing your next project?
Um, yeah, I mean, a little bit, yeah. Like, especially with my editor, I told him kind of what I was planning for the next books and the direction I was going to go in. And originally I had like 5 or 6 books planned, and he was like, "Oh, I don't think what your idea is for going forward really suits the genre, because essentially I was going to make these stories go through generations, and then eventually end up in a cyberpunk future, in a crime-ridden cyberpunk city." But he was like, "No, I don't think you should mix genres like that." And I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, fair enough." So now I've kind of gone back, and so the second book is still the same, but now I've kind of started to rewrite the third book, and I'm just going to keep it as a trilogy. And I think the idea for the third book might be even better. It kind of just came to me when I was just thinking, okay, what other avenue can I go down to? What path, I need to split off in another direction. You know what I mean? And that's always tough to begin with. You need to, because you've been thinking in a certain way for so long, you need a couple of days to wrap your head around something new and a new direction. But once I kind of had in my brain, oh, okay, this is another potential direction, and that could actually be good, and then start expanding on that. I was excited about it. But yeah, I think
Complete the circle and have it instead of you can go from high school to the nursing home.
Yeah. Grandpa Killers, mate. Yeah. This will be a whole bunch of old people sitting on couches. Yes. With oxygen masks.
But if you'd like to give one more pitch for the book and where people can find you on social media, if you're there, then that'd be a good way to kind of start to close the show.
Okay, so if you're interested in seeing my art, go to Instagram and look up kgdesigns.art. You can also get a free, I believe it's 20-page preview of the book at wildnorthcomics.com. So that will give you a real, idea of what the book is and what it's about and the art style. And if you like that, you can just go to the Kickstarter and back it. That's what I would say to do. And so you just go to Kickstarter and look up the Underclass, and it'll come up. Yeah, that's it really.
Okay, and I know that some campaigns do this, but are you doing like late pledges or?
Yes. It's always helpful to get late pledges because you never know how much further you can push it. I mean, the last campaign that Wild North did, I think it ended at 5, and then after doing late pledges, they ended up with like 7.5. That's another 2.5 grand. So yeah, we'll be doing late pledges. So if the campaign's over when you see this and you think you might be interested, it's okay. It'll still be open. You can get a late pledge. You can get all the same stuff, just as a late reward. So yeah, definitely check it out.
That's good to know, and knowing that I will include it in our weekly crowdfunding roundup, which we publish on Saturdays. And had I known about it earlier, I would have put it in there before, and I apologize for that.
Yeah, thanks, dude. I appreciate it. Yeah, cool.
So we will probably be back next week or the week after that. I'm not sure. I know San Diego's right around the corner, and we usually do a Eisner chat about who we think should win. But just kind of keep looking for the next show on our uh, Twitter feed or over on comicwatch.com. And as my co-host always likes to say, the world these days can be a pretty bad place, but do something nice for somebody, support local artists, support your local comic shop. Just don't be a dick. And we will see everybody next time.